What happens when a manufacturer abandons 20 years of tradition to chase a single goal? At the Mugello circuit, the silence of a closed-door test was shattered by a sound that shouldn't exist. A Yamaha V4 engine, pushed to the edge of physics by a rider who refuses to acknowledge them. The data coming out of the garage isn't just fast. It's a warning to every champion on the grid. This is the moment the 2026 MotoGP hierarchy was rewritten in carbon fiber and blood. For decades, the Yamaha M1 was defined by the surgical precision of the inline-4 engine, a philosophy of momentum and grace that eventually hit a ceiling against the raw power of European V4s. As the 2026 preseason dawned at Mugello, the silence of the Tuscan hills was shattered by a new guttural roar, the Yamaha V4 prototype. This wasn't just a mechanical update. It was a total ideological surrender to the pursuit of pure velocity. The stakes were absolute. If this project failed, Yamaha's relevance in the modern era would vanish. Engineers stood in the garage with bated breath as the black-clad Cadillac of the paddock was rolled out, carrying the weight of a legendary brand's survival on its carbon fiber shoulders. The atmosphere was heavy with the scent of high-octane fuel and the crushing pressure of a multi-million-dollar gamble that had to pay off today. The world was watching, but the garage doors remained firmly shut to keep the technical secrets hidden away.
Toprak Razgatlıoğlu did not arrive in the MotoGP paddock to be a PR trophy or a Turkish marketing asset. He arrived as a disruptor of the established order. While skeptics suggested his World Superbike roots would leave him struggling with the rigid demands of a prototype, Toprak viewed the M1 V4 not as a challenge, but as a tool for total domination. His reputation for stuntman braking and impossible entries preceded him, yet the data from the first run suggested something far more cerebral. He wasn't fighting the bike, he was speaking a language the new V4 engine finally understood. This was the birth of a technical accelerator, a rider whose sheer aggression forced the engineers to rethink their traditional boundaries. As he exited the pit lane for the first session, the telemetry didn't just show a rider seeking speed. It showed a predator hunting for the limit of a machine that had finally been given the teeth to bite back against its rivals. The first true test of the V4 soul occurred at the end of Mugello's terrifyingly fast main street, where riders must hold the bike down from over 220 miles per hour for the San Donato hairpin. Historically, the Yamaha chassis would protest under such extreme load, suffering from rear-wheel lift and a terrifying whiff that forced riders to brake earlier than their Ducati counterparts. However, as Toprak pulled the lever, the V4 prototype remained eerily flat.
Telemetry confirmasi, he was braking meters later than anyone thought possible, utilizing a stop-and-go style that turned the bike's stability into a lethal weapon. The mechanical balance allowed for a massive weight transfer to the front tire without sacrificing the racing line. This was the first crack in the traditional MotoGP hierarchy, a moment where the soft Yamaha identity was replaced by a brutal, uncompromising efficiency that left observers in the service road stunned by the violence of the deceleration. Inside the high-tech confines of the Yamaha command center, the mood shifted from nervous to electric. The engineers began an unauthorized comparison, overlaying Toprak's life sector times with the gold standard of the sport, Marc Marquez. Even though Marquez was not on track, his historical data from recent Mugello tests served as the ultimate yardstick for elite performance. To the disbelief of the technical staff, Toprak was not just matching the Spaniard, he was finding time in the high-speed transitions where Marquez had traditionally been untouchable. Reports suggested that even Marquez's camp was alerted to the anomaly of a Yamaha matching his Sector 3 pace. The fencing of the information was strict, but the internal whispers were undeniable. The benchmark had been moved. For the first time in years, the data suggested that a Yamaha rider possessed the front-end confidence to challenge the most aggressive braker in the history of the sport.
If San Donato proved the braking, the Arrabbiata 1 and 2 corners proved the V4 soul. These blind uphill right-handers demand total trust in the bike's aero package and mid-corner stability. Toprak entered these sections with a lean angle and entry speed that defied the average test rider's logic. The V4's compact engine architecture allowed for a more centralized mass, giving Toprak the ability to flick the bike with a brutal yet controlled motion that maintained a higher average speed than the previous inline 4 ever could. This wasn't just about the engine's horsepower, it was about how that power was managed through the chassis during extreme lateral loads. The bike didn't push wide, it held the painted line with a tenacity that suggested Yamaha had finally unlocked the secret to the modern Ducati philosophy. The sector times coming across the screens were no longer just good, they were historic, signaling that the M1 had finally evolved into a complete balanced racing machine. The most dramatic moment of the test didn't happen on the asphalt, but in front of the monitors. Fabio Quartararo, the man who had carried Yamaha on his back through its darkest years, reportedly sat in total silence for several minutes after reviewing Toprak's telemetry. The data revealed a disturbing truth. The V4 was capable of things Fabio hadn't yet explored.
While Fabio's style is built on silk-smooth lines and surgical precision, Toprak's brutalist approach was extracting a level of performance from the V4 that seemed to rewrite the M1's DNA. This internal conflict created a heavy atmosphere in the garage. Fabio wasn't just seeing a fast teammate, he was seeing the end of an era where he was the sole architect of the bike's development. The silence was a realization that the 2026 season would not be a solo mission, but a civil war for technical supremacy within the team. The Prince of Precision now had to contend with a rival who could ride the bike's mechanical limits. A single fast lap in a time attack simulation is one thing, but the true terror of Toprak's Mugello performance was his pace during the race simulations. As the sun beat down on the track and the tire temperatures soared, the Turkish rider maintained a rhythm that stayed within 0.2 of his personal best for 15 consecutive laps. Usually, the Yamaha would struggle as the rear tire degraded, losing the edge grip required for corner speed. However, Toprak's unique V-shaped racing lines allowed him to pick the bike up earlier, utilizing the massive torque of the V4 to drive out of corners while the bike was more upright. This preserved the shoulder of the tire, a technical breakthrough that had eluded Yamaha for half a decade.
Engineers noted that his drop-off was almost non-existent, a data point that made the performance truly terrifying for the rest of the grid. He wasn't just fast for a moment, he was built for the grueling distance of a full Grand Prix. The success at Mugello was the result of a forced evolution. Toprak's extreme demands on the front end forced Yamaha's technical department to find previously unthinkable solutions for electronic mapping and brake migration. By pushing the bike to a breaking point that more conservative riders would avoid, he accelerated the development cycle by months. The V4's engine braking control, or EBC, had to be completely rewritten to accommodate his sliding entries, resulting in a software package that gave him total control over the rear wheel slip. This synergy between rider and machine turned the M1 into a laboratory of speed. Paddock observers noted that the bike looked tighter and more responsive than it ever had in the preseason. It was no longer an experimental project, it was a refined weapon. The decision to hire Toprak was no longer being questioned by the old guard in Japan, it was being hailed as the most strategic masterstroke in the brand's modern history. Word of the closed-door records at Mugello began to leak through the paddock like a shockwave. Rivals who had written Yamaha off as a transitional team in 2026 were suddenly forced to recalibrate their expectations.
Analysts began to point out that Toprak's ability to read the mechanical limits of the bike was a quality usually reserved for veterans with a decade of MotoGP experience. The narrative of adaptasi was dead. The narrative of conquest had begun. The comparison to Marc Marquez was no longer a headline-grabbing dream, but a statistical reality backed by the telemetry of the most demanding track in Italy. Paddock insiders whispered that the Ducati dominance was finally under threat from an unexpected direction. The Yamaha V4 was no longer a work in progress, it was a verified contender, and Toprak Razgatlıoğlu was the pilot capable of taking it to the top step. The power balance of the sport had shifted in a single afternoon of high-speed testing. As the sun set over the Mugello circuit, the Yamaha team packed up with a sense of controlled optimism that bordered on the revolutionary. They had come to Italy seeking data, but they left with a new reality. The 2026 season was no longer about surviving, it was about the hunt.
Toprak Razgatlıoğlu had proven that he could not only handle the V4 but could bend it to his will, surpassing the records of the sport's most decorated legends. The black Cadillac of Yamaha was ready for the spotlight. While the official season opener remained weeks away, the psychological victory had already been won.
The world would soon see if this Mugello miracle could translate into a championship trophy. But for now, the message to Marquez and the Ducati Armada was clear. A new force had arrived, and the rules of the game had changed forever. The hunt for the 2026 title would not be a procession. It would be a war of high-speed attrition where no record was safe.